80% of human history wasn't innovation. It was figuring out how to make Steve from the neighboring village regret existing. Throughout history, justice wasn't about rehabilitation. It was about making a grand spectacle. It was about turning a criminal into a squishy, screaming public service announcement. So today, we are going to rank the absolute worst punishments in human history on a tier list. We're going from D tier, which is basically high school bullying, all the way up to S tier, which are man-made nightmares. D tier. These punishments aren't going to kill you, but they will ensure you never get invited to a dinner party again. First up, we have the Drunkard's Cloak, also known as the Newcastle Cloak. This was popular in 17th century England for public drunkenness. The authorities would force you to wear a giant wooden barrel with holes cut out for your head and hands and then march you through town. It's basically historical cosplay. You look like a poverty-stricken Lego character. The pain here is minimal, mostly just chafing and a bruised ego. It's humiliating, sure, but compared to what's coming later, this is a walk in the park. Next in D tier, the shame flute, or if you're German and angry, the Schandflöte. This was an iron clamp shaped like a flute that locked your fingers to a heavy metal pipe attached to your neck. It was used for bad musicians, blasphemers, and people who talk too much. You're basically forced to stand in the town square looking like you were about to drop the worst mixtape of 1650. It hurts your neck and your arms cramp up, but you keep your skin. Solid D tier. C tier. These are the punishments where you'll technically survive, but you're going to need a lot of aloe vera. First, the classic, tarring and feathering. Cartoons make this look like a fun prank. It is not. In reality, they didn't use lukewarm road tar, they used boiling hot pine tar. They paint you with liquid heat, which causes immediate severe burns, and then dump a sack of feathers on you. The real punishment starts when you try to take it off. The tar cools and hardens, bonding to your skin. Peeling it off is, let's just say it's the world's worst exfoliation routine. And next we have the Spanish donkey. Despite the cute name, this is not a petting zoo attraction. It's a wooden beam sharpened into a wedge. You sit on top of it, straddling the edge. Then, to make sure gravity does its job, they tie heavy weights to your ankles. The wedge slowly slices you vertically. It's essentially the split-you-in-half-inator 3000. You generally survive this, but you will never walk or sit normally ever again. You'll be stuck doing that post-leg day waddle for the rest of your life without, well, legs. B tier. First up, the heavy metal mascot itself, the Iron Maiden. You know it, you love it. It's a coffin with spikes on the inside. The idea is that the doors close and the spikes pierce you, but crucially, they miss your vital organs, so you slowly bleed to death while standing up. It's elegant, it's terrifying, and it's mostly a lie. That's right, historians are pretty sure the Iron Maiden was never actually used in the Middle Ages. It was likely invented in the 19th century by museums who wanted to make the past look extra spooky for tourists. It's basically Victorian fan fiction about medieval torture. So it gets B tier for the concept, but it loses points because it's essentially a tourist trap. However, our next entry is very, very real. The rack. The rack is the Honda Civic of torture devices. Reliable, simple, and found everywhere in Europe. The mechanics were terrifyingly simple. You lie down on a wooden frame. Your ankles are tied to a roller at the bottom, your wrists to a roller at the top. Then the executioner turns a handle. At first, it just stretches your muscles, but as the tension increases, the fibers in your ligaments physically cannot hold the load. First, your shoulders pop out of their sockets. Then your hips, knees, and elbows follow. Witnesses reported that the sound of cartilage snapping was loud enough to be heard outside the dungeon. It sounded like dry wood snapping in a fire. If you survived, you were left permanently disabled, a floppy, useless meat puppet. It gets a solid B tier because it didn't always kill you, but it definitely ruined your weekend plans. Forever. A tier. Now we cross the line. Everything before this point was cruel. A tier is where human creativity goes to a place that makes Satan say, "Whoa, chill out, man." Welcome to keel hauling. This was a favorite of the Dutch and English navies. If you were a sailor who messed up big time, they would tie a rope around you, toss you off one side of the ship, and drag you under the hull to the other side. Oh, so it's just holding your breath, you ask? No, it is not. Because the bottom of a wooden ship isn't smooth. It's covered in barnacles. Barnacles are razor-sharp calcium deposits. Dragging a human body across a barnacle-crusted hull is effectively putting them through a cheese grater the size of a galleon. If you didn't drown, and if your head didn't smash against the ship's wooden spine, you emerged on the other side with your skin shredded. The salt water in the wounds ensured you'd probably die of infection later. It is a logistical nightmare and a sensory horror. Impalement. Made famous by Vlad III, aka Dracula, this wasn't just stabbing someone with a big stick. That would be too quick. The goal here was duration. The executioners would grease a rounded, not sharp, wooden pole. They would insert it at the bottom of the torso and then hoist the victim up vertically. Gravity would slowly pull the victim down, forcing the stake up through the body. Because the tip was rounded, it pushed organs aside rather than piercing them. This meant you didn't die immediately. Victims could survive for days, writhing in slow-motion agony, displayed as a warning to others. It's the ultimate combination of engineering and cruelty. It requires knowledge of human anatomy to ensure maximum suffering without accidental death. It misses S tier because eventually you pass out. But don't worry, S tier is coming, and S tier doesn't let you sleep. The S tier. If A tier was cruel, S tier is artistic. These are the punishments where the goal wasn't just to kill you, but to see how much trauma the human soul can endure before it essentially uninstalls itself. First up, Ling Chi. Known in the West as death by 1,000 cuts, this was a method used in China from around the 10th century all the way up to 1905. And the name isn't poetic, it's literal. The executioner would tie you to a post and systematically remove pieces of you. They started with the trivial stuff, a bit of the chest, a slice of the thigh, maybe a finger. The horror here is the pacing. This wasn't a frenzy, it was a job. Sometimes the victim was given opium, not as an act of mercy, but to keep them conscious and prevent them from passing out from the shock. They wanted you awake to watch yourself be dismantled like a Lego set. It gets S tier because of the psychological component. You aren't just dying, you are forced to spectate your own deletion. And finally, the king, the absolute worst way to leave this planet. Scaphism, also known as the boats. This is an ancient Persian invention that sounds like a fever dream. Step 1, take the victim. Step 2, force feed them milk and honey until they develop severe gastrointestinal distress. Step 3, slather their face and exposed limbs in more milk and honey. Step 4, sandwich them between two boats so only their head, hands, and feet are sticking out. Step 5, push them into a stagnant, hot swamp. Now you wait. The honey attracts insects. Wasps, flies, ants. They start eating the honey. Then they start eating you. But remember the milk? The victim is now lying in a pool of their own waste inside the boat. This attracts vermin. The bugs don't just bite, they burrow. They lay eggs inside the victim's exposed flesh and inside the boat. The victim is literally eaten alive from the inside out. And the worst part? The executioners would come back every day to force-feed you more milk and honey to keep you alive. Plutarch wrote about a soldier named Mithridates who survived this for 17 days. 17 days of being a living buffet for the swamp. 17 days! I can't even sit through a 15-second ad without losing my mind. That is why scaphism is the undisputed king of S-tier. It combines claustrophobia, biological horror, and the sheer duration of suffering into one perfect nightmare. Conclusion. So there you have it, the hierarchy of human suffering. If we look at this tier list, we learn something profound about our species. When it comes to medicine, or feeding the poor, or fixing the printer, humanity is often slow and incompetent. But when it comes to hurting Dave, who stole a loaf of bread, we become sudden geniuses. We understand anatomy, engineering, and psychology perfectly just to maximize the misery of one guy. It's terrifying. But hey, at least we live in the modern era. The worst punishment you have to deal with is slow internet buffering or listening to a podcast host try to sell you an exotic supplement. Thanks for watching. Comment below. If you had to choose one of these punishments for someone you hate, which one would it be? And if you say scaphism, I'm calling the police because you are clearly insane. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I can afford to not live in a barrel. Until next time, stay out of the swamp.